pleasure to introduce a special guest speaker, the Louisiana Governor. Please help me welcome to the stage the Honorable Bobby Jindal.
I want to, first of all, start off by thanking my good friend, your governor, Terry Branstad, for the great job he's doing for the people of Iowa. Cutting taxes, growing the economy, reforming your educational system. He's going to do a great job if we give him another 4 years. Let's hear a round of applause for Terry and Kim as they continue. You've got several great leaders here, whether it's your Senator Chuck Grassley, whether it's Steve King, your congressman. I tell you what, I had the privilege of getting to know the next United States Senator from the great state of Iowa. Isn't Joni an amazing, amazing principled conservative? There are so many reasons to help her get elected. She will rein in taxes, rein in government spending. But if you needed one more reason to get excited, how amazing come this November when we get to retire Harry Reid. We no longer have to call him the majority leader of the United States Senate. I thought long and hard about what I wanted to share with you today. I want to share with you today my greatest concern, my greatest frustration, my greatest fear of the Obama administration and his legacy. There's so much that worries me about President Obama. I worry about $17 trillion of debt. I worry about an EPA that's going to strangle our economy. I worry about more taxing, more spending, more borrowing. I worry about a diminished America on the world stage. I worry about an economic growth of 2% that he calls a recovery. I worry about a culture that becomes more coarse day by day by day. But the thing that worries me the most, not only as the governor of the great state of Louisiana, but as the father of 3 young children, is this president's attempt to redefine the American dream. Now, what do I mean by that? If you listen to this president long enough, if you watch his policies, what you hear, what you see is a focus on class envy. What you hear and what you see is a president intent on dividing us by geography, by age, by gender, by success. What you see is a president who talks about redistribution, a president who seems to believe that America is about equality of outcomes instead of equality of opportunity. I don't know about you, but that is not the American dream my parents taught me about. The American dream is not about growing the federal government, growing its presence, the taxes, the spending. The American dream is not about managing the slow decline of this great economy, this great country. The American dream is not about making us more and more like Europe. The American dream is different. The American dream is that the circumstances of your birth don't determine your outcomes as an adult. The American dream is that you don't have to be born in the right zip code, to the right gender, to the right race, to the right parents to do well in this great country. The American dream is that if you work hard, you get a great education, you can do better than your parents and your grandparents. Indeed, how many parents have told their young children, if you work hard, you can be the first in our family to go to school. You can be the first in our family to become a small business owner, to be an entrepreneur, a farmer, a doctor, an accountant, whatever your dreams are. How many moms and dads have told their kids that any boy or girl, any child in America can grow up to become president of the United States? Unfortunately, we found out how true that was in 2008 and 2012. You see, my parents taught me an American dream where our best days are ahead of us, not behind us. Where we're a forever young country. And I want to talk to you today about how we have to fight to preserve that American dream for our children and our grandchildren. I want to start by sharing with you why that American dream is so important to me. You see, my parents, my dad especially, he has lived the American dream. My dad's one of 9 kids. First and only one in his family that got past the 5th grade. Grew up in a house without electricity, without running water. I know because we've heard these stories every single day growing up. And maybe you've got a parent or a grandparent like that who's the first in your family. And what's amazing is nearly 50 years ago, my mom and dad came from halfway across the world. They came to America because they were in search of the American dream. I want you to think about something. There was no internet back then. It wasn't that easy to get on a plane back then. International long-distance phone calls were incredibly expensive back then. My parents had never been to America. My parents had never been to Louisiana. My parents had never met anybody who had been to Louisiana. But they had this unshakable faith. They had this conviction, they had this belief, if you get there, and if you work hard, and if you get a great education, you can provide your children with a better quality of life. They knew the American dream was alive and well. They came nearly 50 years ago so that my mom could study at LSU. And my dad, he didn't know anybody. He was in married student housing, and so he literally opened up the phone book, went through the yellow pages, and started calling company after company after company looking for a job. And I don't know how many people turned him down. I don't know how many people laughed in his face. I don't know how many people slammed the phone. But after hours, after days, I don't know, maybe even after weeks of making phone calls, he finally convinced a guy to take a chance on him. There was a guy in a railroad company that said, you can start on Monday. Now, what I love about the rest of this story is you have to meet my dad to understand this. He hadn't even met his new boss. He had finally gotten a job. So he tells this boss who he's never met, that's great, I'll start Monday. He says, now look, I don't have a car, I don't have a driver's license. You're going to have to pick me up on the way to work Monday morning. But you know what? His boss was so taken by his enthusiasm and his energy, he did that. 6 months later, I was born at Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge. Same hospital, by the way, where a couple of my kids were born. And by the way, when I was born, I was what you would politely call a pre-existing condition. Now, there was no Obamacare or anything like that back then. So my dad did something that was pretty simple and pretty common back then. He went to the doctor and he shook hands with the doctor. And he said, I'll send you a check every month until I pay this bill in full. There was no Obamacare, there was no government program, there was no paperwork. There were two guys in a hospital shaking hands. And that's just what you did. When my kids were born, we had great insurance. It took us hours to fill out the paperwork. It wasn't nearly that simple. But you know, I don't know if that would work today. I asked my dad, it was a simpler time back then, I said, Dad, how do you pay for a baby on layaway? I mean, if you skip a payment, do they take the baby back? What do they do? He said, son, don't worry, you're paid for in full. Nobody's coming to take you back. He said, if we could have sent you back, we would have skipped a payment, but we didn't. The reason I tell you that is my parents have lived the American dream. And my dad would always tell my brother and me growing up, he'd say, sons, I'm not leaving you an inheritance. I'm not leaving you a famous last name. But he said every single day you should get on your knees and give thanks to God that you are blessed to be born in the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States. My dad said what is so great is that if you're willing to work hard, if you get a great education, there's no limit on what you can do in this great country. And you know, there's so many things I could talk about what we have done in Louisiana. We've cut our state budget 26%, eliminated 28,000 state government jobs, lowest unemployment rate in the South. I just signed a couple of bills on Thursday helping to make sure that Louisiana continues to be the most pro-life state in the country. We put our own version of the Second Amendment into our state constitution, but the thing I want to talk to you about today, and one of the things I think is one of the most important things we have done, is we have fought to preserve the American dream for our children, and in part, that means making sure that every child has the chance to get a great education. Because you see, it's not fair to tell a child you have a chance to pursue the American dream if you're trapped in a failing school. Now, we've done several things to put great teachers in every classroom. One of the most important things we've done is we've said we're going to let the dollars follow the child instead of making the child follow the dollars. Of our kids in New Orleans are in charter schools. We have doubled the percentage doing reading and math on grade level in 5 years. We have got one of the country's most expansive, ambitious, comprehensive school choice program where the dollars follow the child so the parent can decide. Because you see, every child learns differently. Some children are better homeschooled. Some children do better in public schools. Some children do better in Christian schools, parochial schools, online schools, dual enrollment programs. We trust our parents. Now, the unions didn't like this much. One of them got up and said this. They said, parents don't have a clue. Parents don't have a clue when it comes to making choices for their kids. I can't summarize the debate better between the left and the right. You see, they don't think we're smart enough to decide what size Slurpee or sodas we drink. They don't think we're smart enough to exercise our Second Amendment rights. They don't think we're smart enough to buy our own health insurance product and decide what we want to buy. They don't think we're smart enough to pick the schools for our children or to exercise our First Amendment rights. Now, they took us to the state Supreme Court. They picketed. We won those fights. We've got a program. We're saving taxpayers tens of millions of dollars. 93% of the parents are happy with the program. It's growing by double digits. Who could be opposed to giving children better education and more choices? Eric Holder, that's who. The Department of Justice, Eric Holder, actually took us to federal court. Actually took us to federal court to stop these children from having a chance to get a great education. I went to D.C. and I called the administration's attempt cynical, immoral, and hypocritical.